Welcome to this explainer. If you're a parent, a caregiver, or honestly just someone fascinated by how the human brain develops, you know the dark is, well, it's a complicated place. Today, we're diving straight into the fascinating psychology behind nighttime fears. We're going to look closely at what the scientific literature actually tells us about these fears, and more importantly, how we can use that data to transform bedtime from a stressful battle into a truly empowering experience that builds lifelong confidence. I mean, we've literally all been there, right? You're standing in a dimly lit bedroom, and suddenly, a completely normal coat draped over a chair transforms into a terrifying monster lurking in the corner. Or maybe it's the shadow of a tree branch dancing across the wall, looking exactly like a giant hand reaching out. As adults, we shake this off in a fraction of a second. But for a child, that moment of sheer panic is incredibly profound. It's a scenario playing out in millions of homes every single night, turning what should be a peaceful drift into sleep into a spike of high anxiety for everybody involved.
So let's start with part one, the monster in the room, and understand the universal fear of shadows.
To really get what's going on here, we have to recognize that this isn't just a child being stubborn or trying to delay bedtime. Not at all. According to a massive 25-year review by Lewis and colleagues, along with some really fresh 2024 research by Shields and their team, a child's fear of shadows is actually a specific, highly documented developmental phase. It's one of the most common, well-mapped fears in all of human psychology. Essentially, the child encounters an ambiguous shape in low light, and their imagination actively resolves that ambiguity into a threat. It's a completely natural psychological milestone.
Moving on to part two, why shadows become scary. Let's look at the psychology of low-light vision.
So what is literally happening inside a kid's developing brain when the lights go out? Well, the brain absolutely hates a vacuum. As adults, we have decades of lived environmental context. Our brain uses logic to instantly say, hey, it's just a coat. But a child's brain operates completely differently in the dark. When visual data is restricted, they don't have that logic to fall back on. So their brain forces an interpretation, defaulting to an ancient evolutionary defense mechanism. It fills that visual vacuum with the scariest plausible interpretation, assuming the unknown shape is a threat until proven otherwise. And here's where it gets really fascinating. Young kids haven't fully developed what psychologists call fantasy-reality boundaries. Because that boundary is so blurry, these imagined threats feel incredibly, terrifyingly real to them. The psychological literature confirms that when you combine this immature boundary with a natural physiological spike in heart rate from just being alone in the dark, the fear is amplified tremendously. The child isn't pretending. Their body is genuinely reacting as if there is a real, physical threat in the room, fueled entirely by that shadow on the wall. Which brings us to part three, building mastery in the dark. Let's talk about some evidence-based tools for parents and caregivers.
Knowing all this brain science, how do we actually collaborate with our kids to navigate the dark? Well, recent 2026 research by Orgiles and colleagues points to a concept called graduated mastery. The goal here isn't to magically banish the dark, it's to build their tolerance and competence within it. You do this by giving them a child-controlled dim light. Think a small torch or a targeted nightlight. Give them the agency without flooding the room with a blazing overhead light that ruins their sleep cycle. Couple that environmental control with a super calm, consistent bedtime routine, and of course, strictly limit any scary media before bed.
And that leads us to a physical technique psychologists call reality testing. When your kid is terrified of a shadow, you don't just brush it off. Here's the playbook. Step 1, you turn on the light together. Step 2, physically trace that scary shape on the wall right back to its source, the branch outside, the toy on the shelf, or the coat on the chair. And step 3, you empower the child to uncover and learn the truth. By walking through these steps, you are literally teaching their brain how to manually override that fear response and resolve the ambiguity with facts. Now, part 4, the worst thing to say. This is a super common pitfall parents face. Look, in our rush to soothe a panicking kid, it is almost a reflex to just say, there's nothing there. We've all done it. We just want to instantly comfort them. But the data clearly shows that repeatedly tossing out there's nothing there without ever showing them what is there is absolutely the worst thing you can say. It's totally counterproductive. Let's break down why. Saying the room is empty completely dismisses their very real feeling of terror. Remember that blurry fantasy reality boundary we just talked about? To them, there absolutely is something there. By just brushing it off, you invalidate their physical experience. Plus, you totally miss the golden opportunity to teach them how to investigate their environment. You're basically asking them to just take your word for it, instead of equipping them with the tools to self-regulate when you step out of the room. Instead of that empty reassurance, you've got to team up and find the real source of the shadow together. This is how you shift a child from being a passive victim of the dark into an active, capable investigator. When you say, hey, let's go see what's making that shape, you take the mystery, which breeds fear, and you transform it into mastery, which breeds confidence. You are actively teaching them a coping mechanism they can eventually use entirely on their own.
Okay, part 5. When to seek help. Let's recognize where the safety line is.
While these nighttime fears are incredibly normal, there is definitely a threshold we need to watch out for. If a child has persistent nighttime fear that triggers severe panic, constantly wrecks their sleep, or just lingers way past the typical developmental window, it warrants professional input. If you're trying these graduated mastery techniques and the child's quality of life is still suffering, reach out to a pediatrician or a child psychologist. Seriously, never try to diagnose this stuff yourself. Let the professionals guide you to the right resources.
As we completely rethink how we handle bedtime, I want to leave you with this final thought. We now know that a fear of shadows isn't a kid misbehaving. It's this fascinating intersection of low-light visual processing and immature fantasy boundaries. But honestly, it's also a profound opportunity. So the next time a shadow terrifies your child, what's your move? Will you just dismiss the feeling and try to turn off the dark? Or will you grab a flashlight, team up as investigators, and use that shadow to turn on their confidence?